The morning sun broke over Geneva as the alien ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. They came without warning but without hostility, their vessels gleaming like polished silver against the blue sky. Within hours, every screen on Earth showed the same image. Tall, elegant beings with crystalline skin that seemed to catch and refract light in mesmerizing patterns. They called themselves the Xinthian Imperium, and they brought news that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the emergency session of the United Earth Council, watching the alien transmission with careful eyes. She had spent 30 years in Earth's defense forces, rising through the ranks during the quiet years when humanity expanded slowly through the solar system. Now everything had changed. The Xinthians spoke of a vast galactic community, thousands of species living under the guidance of various empires and federations. They promised technology, trade, and protection. The word protection made Chen's jaw tighten slightly, though her face remained neutral. The first week passed in a blur of diplomatic meetings and cultural exchanges. The Xinthians seemed genuinely curious about humanity, asking questions about Earth's history, art, and science. They marveled at human literature and music, but when discussions turned to military matters, their attitude shifted from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. War Master Kelthraz, the commander of the Xinthian diplomatic fleet, requested a tour of Earth's defense installations. The council agreed, hoping to demonstrate that humanity was not defenseless. Chen personally escorted Kelthraz and his officers to the Gibraltar Defense Platform, one of humanity's most advanced orbital installations. The massive structure hung in space above Earth, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Chen felt a quiet pride as they walked through the command center. But that pride began to curdle as she noticed the Xinthians' reactions. They whispered to each other in their musical language, and their translator devices picked up words like quaint and historical. The tour continued to the platform's main battery. Through the observation window, they could see the massive railgun assembly, a marvel of human engineering that could accelerate projectiles to tremendous speeds using electromagnetic force. Chen explained the system's capabilities, describing how it could hit targets anywhere in near-Earth space with devastating accuracy. Kelthraz listened politely, his crystalline face reflecting the lights of the gun battery in strange patterns. When Chen finished her explanation, Kelthraz smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but rather the indulgent expression one might give to a child showing off a drawing. He gestured to the railgun with one long, graceful hand and spoke in perfect English, his voice like wind chimes. Admiral Chen, your people's dedication to these kinetic weapons is admirable in its nostalgia. You still throw metal at your enemies? How wonderfully primitive. His officers made sounds that their translators rendered as polite laughter. Chen felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. These weapons have served humanity well for centuries. We continue to refine and improve them. Kelthraz nodded as if she had just proven his point. Of course. And I am certain they were quite fearsome against other humans with similar technology. But you must understand, Admiral, the galaxy has moved beyond such crude methods. Our plasma lances can slice through a ship's hull from 10,000 kilometers away. Our disruptor beams unmake matter at the molecular level. Kinetic weapons, railguns, missiles, artillery. These are relics of a more violent, less sophisticated age. One of the Xinthian officers stepped forward, his tone friendly but patronizing. We encountered a species once that still used explosive chemical propellants in their weapons. Can you imagine? Your electromagnetically accelerated projectiles are certainly more advanced than that, but the principle remains the same. Throwing objects at each other, it is, very old-fashioned. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, who had been standing quietly beside Chen, spoke up for the first time. The physicist had been invited to answer any technical questions, but until now she had simply observed. Old-fashioned does not mean ineffective. Physics does not become obsolete. Her voice was calm but carried an edge that made Chen glance at her with new respect. Kelthraz turned his attention to Dr. Okonkwo with the same indulgent expression. A fair philosophical point, Doctor. But in practical terms, energy weapons have made kinetic weapons obsolete in modern space combat. Our shields can track and destroy incoming projectiles long before they pose a threat. The future of warfare is energy, not mass. The tour continued, but the damage had been done. At each installation, whether showing them Earth's naval railgun cruisers, the Mars defense batteries, or the asteroid mining operations that doubled as weapons foundries, The Xinthians reacted with the same polite condescension. They praised human determination, while making it clear they viewed Earth's military as hopelessly outdated. On the final day of the tour, the tone shifted dramatically. The diplomatic pleasantries were set aside as Kelthraz and his delegation met with the full United Earth Council. The War Master stood before the assembly, his crystalline form seeming to glow with inner light, and presented what he called a generous offer of protection. In careful, diplomatic language, he explained that the galaxy was a dangerous place. Humanity was new, inexperienced, and poorly armed by galactic standards. The Xinthian Imperium, out of respect for Earth's potential, was willing to extend its protection over human space. The terms were presented in a thick document that legal experts would spend days analyzing, but the core message was clear. Humanity would become a protectorate of the Imperium. Earth would provide resources and labor. The Xinthians would provide protection and technology. Human military forces would be reduced to system defense only, with the Imperium handling any external threats. Human ships would require Xinthian approval to leave their own territory. Chen sat in the back of the council chamber, her hands gripped tightly together in her lap. She had seen such arrangements before in Earth's own history. Different names, different justifications, but always the same result. This was not protection being offered. This was subjugation wrapped in velvet words. The council deliberated for 3 days. The debates were heated. Some argued that humanity needed the Imperium's advanced technology and that the restrictions were temporary, until humans could stand as equals. Others insisted that accepting such terms would be surrendering the independence humanity had fought so hard to achieve. Dr. Okonkwo presented classified reports on human weapons development that made several council members reconsider their positions. On the 4th day, the council delivered their answer to War Master Kelthraz. The Secretary General stood before the Xinthian delegation and spoke clearly. The people of Earth thanked the Xinthian Imperium for their generous offer. However, we must respectfully decline. Humanity wishes to join the galactic community as free and equal partners, not as wards or vassals. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kelthraz's expression, which had maintained its friendly cast throughout the negotiations, hardened into something cold and sharp. The crystalline patterns on his face seemed to darken. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its musical quality. How unfortunate. We had hoped you would be reasonable. You do not understand the dangers that exist beyond your small system. You do not comprehend how fragile your primitive defenses truly are. He stood, his full height towering over the human diplomats. The Imperium will give you 30 days to reconsider. Think carefully about your choice. It would be tragic if humanity's pride led to its unnecessary suffering. The Xinthian delegation departed Earth that evening. Their ships rose through the atmosphere in perfect formation, a display of precise military discipline that was clearly meant to intimidate. As their fleet gathered in orbit, every sensor on Earth tracked them, watching as they moved to the edge of the solar system and settled into a waiting position. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the Gibraltar platform, watching the distant specks of light that represented the Xinthian fleet. Around her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. No one spoke about what everyone knew. The Xinthians had not left. They were waiting. In 30 days they would return, and they would not be making offers anymore. Chen pulled up a secure communication channel to Mars, the Moon, and the other defense installations scattered throughout human space. She thought about Kelthraz's mocking words about humanity's primitive weapons. She thought about Dr. Okonkwo's quiet reply about physics not becoming obsolete. And she thought about something her old instructor at the Naval Academy had once said. The enemy's greatest weakness is often their certainty about your weakness. All stations, she said quietly into the comm. Begin deployment sequence. Authorization Chen Alpha 7. And someone get me Dr. Okonkwo. It is time to show our guests what old-fashioned really means. The 30 days passed in a storm of quiet activity. Across human space, from Earth's orbit to the asteroid belt and beyond, thousands of vessels moved with purpose. To a casual observer, it might have looked like panic, like humanity was scrambling to build defenses they knew would be inadequate. The Xinthians watched from their position at the edge of the solar system, and their intelligence reports confirmed what they expected to see. The humans were deploying defense platforms, lots of them, scattered throughout their territory in no particular pattern that made tactical sense. War Master Kelthraz reviewed these reports with satisfaction. His analysts had counted over 3,000 platforms deployed in the past month, each one a simple design that matched the primitive kinetic weapons they had seen during their tour. The humans were literally throwing everything they had into space, hoping that quantity might somehow compensate for quality. It was, Kelthraz thought, rather sad, like watching someone try to stop a flood with paper walls. What Kelthraz did not know, what his intelligence could not tell him, was that each of those platforms represented 200 years of continuous refinement. Humanity had been developing mass driver technology since the early 21st century, first for launching cargo into orbit cheaply, then for mining operations, and finally for weapons. Each generation had solved new problems: heat dissipation, power generation, targeting accuracy, projectile design. The platforms the Xinthians dismissed as simple were actually marvels of engineering, each one capable of calculations and adjustments that would have seemed like magic to the humans who first dreamed of railguns. Admiral Chen stood in her command center on the Gibraltar platform, studying the holographic display that showed the entire solar system. Each defense platform appeared as a small blue dot, and there were indeed thousands of them. But they were not randomly placed. Each one occupied a precise position, calculated by teams of mathematicians and physicists working around the clock. Every platform had clear firing lanes overlapping fields of fire, and trajectories that had been computed down to the millimeter. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo floated beside the hologram in the low gravity, using her hands to manipulate the display. She highlighted several platforms near Jupiter's orbit, and lines of fire appeared, showing the calculated paths their projectiles would take. "The math is beautiful," she said softly, almost to herself. "They think in terms of direct fire, like pointing a laser. Energy weapons travel in straight lines at the speed of light. Effective range a few thousand kilometers at most. But kinetic weapons, properly designed, these follow ballistic trajectories. We can fire at targets millions of kilometers away, and if we calculate it correctly, our rounds will arrive exactly when and where we predict." Chen nodded slowly. She had spent weeks reviewing Okonkwo's work, and while the mathematics often went over her head, she understood the principle. "How fast?" she asked. "The platforms near Jupiter are configured for long range. They will accelerate their projectiles to 0.05 c. That is 5% of light speed. Each round weighs approximately 2 tons and carries kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The platforms closer to Earth are optimized differently. Faster acceleration, shorter range, smaller projectiles. Think of it as artillery, Admiral. We have our long-range heavy guns at the outer system, and our rapid-fire batteries closer to home." Chen studied the display for a long moment. "And the Xinthians have no idea?" Okonkwo smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. "They saw our railguns during the tour. They measured the velocities we demonstrated, probably around 0.001 c, standard for ship-to-ship combat in our Navy. Impressive by human standards, but well within what their shields are designed to handle. They do not know about the platforms. They do not know that we have had teams working for 6 months to solve the thermal problems of sustained high-velocity fire. They do not know that every platform has a prototype fusion reactor providing nearly unlimited power. They think we are desperate. They think we are afraid. They have no idea that we have been preparing for this possibility since the moment they arrived." Across the solar system, other preparations continued. Captain Marcus Hall commanded one of the platforms designated Longshot 7, positioned in a lazy orbit that would bring it near Mars in 2 weeks. His crew of 12 lived in the cramped habitat attached to the massive gun assembly, running diagnostics, checking calculations, and waiting. Hall was a veteran of the corporate wars that had raged in the asteroid belt a decade ago, back when mining companies had settled their disputes with violence. He had fired railguns in anger before, had seen what they could do to ships and stations. But Longshot 7 was different. The gun he commanded now made those old weapons look like toys. "Status check," Hall said, floating through the cramped command module. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Park, looked up from her console. "All systems green, Captain. Reactor is operating at 98% efficiency. Projectile magazine is fully loaded. Targeting computer has updated firing solutions every hour based on latest intelligence data. We are ready." Hall looked at the calculations on Park's screen. Numbers that represented trajectories, velocities, impact times. Mathematics that would turn into violence. How many rounds can we fire before we need to cool down? 36 rapid fire, sir. After that, the barrel assembly needs 20 minutes to cool. Or we can fire sustained at a rate of 1 round per minute indefinitely. 36 rounds. Hall thought about that. 36 chances to hit a moving target millions of kilometers away. It seemed impossible. But Park showed him the projections, the computer models that tracked every Xinthian ship, predicted their movements based on observed patterns, calculated where they would be when the rounds arrived. It was not point and shoot. It was more like predicting where a planet would be in its orbit months in advance. Difficult but possible if the math was right. The days continued to count down. On Earth, people went about their lives with a tension that filled every news broadcast and public space. Some demanded that the Council accept the Xinthian offer. Others organized protests supporting Earth's independence. Religious leaders held services. Children asked their parents if there would be a war. The honest parents said they did not know. The dishonest ones promised everything would be fine. Admiral Chen slept 4 hours a night when she slept at all. She reviewed firing solutions, checked deployment statuses, ran simulations over and over. In every simulation, the battle was decided in the first exchange. If the initial salvo succeeded, if the math was correct, if the Xinthians reacted the way human psychologists predicted they would, then humanity had a chance. If any part of the plan failed, Earth's defenses would be swept aside and the Xinthian Imperium would dictate terms at gunpoint. Dr. Okonkwo spent her time double-checking every calculation. She had teams of mathematicians and physicists working in parallel, each group solving the same problems independently, then comparing results. The targeting solutions had to be perfect. At the velocities they were planning, even a tiny error would cause a miss of thousands of kilometers. She barely ate. She barely slept. She knew that everything depended on getting the physics exactly right. On day 28, the Xinthian fleet began to move. They left their holding position at the edge of the solar system and started the long journey toward Earth. They moved in formation, 12 ships in a precise geometric pattern that spoke of discipline and training. Their shields were active, their weapons charged, their sensors sweeping ahead for any threats. They expected the humans might try something desperate. They were prepared for missile swarms, for kamikaze attacks by converted civilian ships, for any of the crude tactics that primitive species typically attempted when faced with superior force. War Master Kelthraz stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Harmonious Unity, watching the tactical display. The human defense platforms were clearly visible on his sensors, scattered throughout the inner solar system. His weapons officers had already calculated optimal approach vectors that would minimize exposure to human fire. They would destroy the platforms as they advanced, systematically eliminating each one before it could pose a threat. The operation would take perhaps 6 hours. Then they would surround Earth and deliver the Imperium's final ultimatum. This time the humans would accept or face destruction. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "we are detecting energy buildup in approximately 40% of the human platforms. It appears they are powering up their weapons." Kelthraz studied the data with interest. "Range to nearest platform?" "Approximately 200 million kilometers, sir." Kelthraz made a sound that his species used to indicate amusement. "They are going to fire at us from 200 million kilometers? With kinetic weapons? Even if they could achieve the velocity, which I doubt, we will have hours to track and destroy any incoming projectiles. Let them waste their ammunition. It will make our task easier." But something nagged at Kelthraz, something about the human admiral's eyes during that last meeting. Chen Wei had not looked afraid. She had not looked desperate. She had looked patient, like someone waiting for a piece to fall into place. Kelthraz pushed the thought aside. It was natural to be cautious, but there was no need for paranoia. The humans were outmatched in every category that mattered. On Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen watched the Xinthian fleet's approach vector appear on her display. Dr. Okonkwo stood beside her, running final calculations. Around them, the command center was silent except for the quiet hum of equipment and the soft voices of officers coordinating with other platforms across the solar system. Chen looked at the countdown timer. 72 hours until the Xinthian fleet would reach Earth. But they would cross into the engagement range of the outer platforms in 6 hours. She took a slow breath, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Humanity's first contact with alien life. The mockery. The ultimatum. And now the test. She opened the fleet-wide channel. Every platform, every ship, every defense installation in human space received her words. All stations, this is Admiral Chen. You know what we face. You know what is at stake. The enemy believes we are primitive. They believe our weapons are obsolete. They believe we will surrender or be crushed. In 6 hours, we are going to teach them a lesson about underestimating humanity. We are going to show them what 200 years of human ingenuity can accomplish. We are going to remind them that physics does not take sides. All batteries, prepare to fire on my command. Stand by for targeting data. And remember, we do not need to destroy them all. We just need to break their certainty. Chen out. She closed the channel and looked at Okonkwo. Is the math right? The physicist met her eyes. The math is right. Then God help us all, Chen said quietly and settled in to wait. The Xinthian fleet continued its advance through the outer solar system, passing Jupiter's orbit with the confidence of predators who had never known what it meant to be prey. War Master Kelthras stood on his bridge, reviewing reports from his subordinate vessels. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The human platforms were indeed powering up, but that was expected. Desperate last stands often began with futile gestures. Sir, we are detecting significant electromagnetic activity from multiple human platforms, his sensor officer reported. Energy signatures consistent with magnetic acceleration systems. They are preparing to fire. Kelthras waved a dismissive hand. Let them. Track all projectiles and eliminate them with point defense. I want a full analysis of their capabilities for the after-action report. The High Command will be interested to see just how far behind galactic standards these humans truly are. In the command center of Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen watched the final seconds count down. Around her, officers sat at their stations with hands poised over controls. Dr. Okonkwo had returned to her lab, monitoring the firing sequences from there. Everything was automated now. The platforms had their firing solutions. The projectiles were loaded. The reactors were at full power. All that remained was to give the order. Chen thought about the mockery in Kelthras's voice during that tour. She thought about the patronizing smiles of the Xinthian officers. She thought about the ultimatum delivered with such casual arrogance, and she thought about something her father had told her when she was young, words he had learned during his own military service. Pride comes before the fall, and the higher the pride, the harder the fall. The timer reached 0. All batteries, Chen said calmly into the fleet channel, fire for effect. Across the solar system, thousands of platforms fired simultaneously, the electromagnetic coils activated in precise sequence, generating magnetic fields of incredible strength. Tungsten carbide projectiles, each one machined to perfect specifications, each one shaped to minimize drag from interplanetary dust, began to accelerate. The platforms shuddered as tremendous forces were unleashed. In the vacuum of space there was no sound, no flash, nothing visible to the naked eye. But instruments recorded the event in exquisite detail. In less than 2 seconds, each platform had accelerated its projectile to 5% of light speed and released it on its calculated trajectory. The rounds streaked through space at 15,000 kilometers per second. At that velocity, the journey from the outer platform ring to the Xinthian fleet took just over 3 hours. 3 hours during which the fleet continued to advance, unaware of what was coming toward them. Captain Marcus Hall watched the firing sequence complete on Longshot 7. The platform had fired its first round perfectly, and the automated systems were already loading the second projectile. He checked the telemetry, confirming that their round was on course. 3 hours and 12 minutes until impact. He wondered what the Xinthians were thinking right now. Did they know what was coming? Did they understand? On the Harmonious Unity, Kelthras's crew detected the launches immediately. Sensors showed multiple projectiles leaving the human platforms at high velocity. The weapons officer quickly calculated trajectories and velocities, and his face showed confusion. Sir, the projectiles are traveling at approximately 0.05 c. That is much faster than we observed during our visit. Kelthras felt a flicker of unease, but he suppressed it. Confirmed? Yes, sir, multiple sensors confirm. The humans must have been holding back their full capabilities during our tour. Kelthras considered this. 0.05 c was indeed faster than expected, but not unprecedented. Time to impact? Approximately 3 hours, sir. We have ample time to track and destroy the incoming rounds with our point defense systems. Kelthraz nodded, his confidence restored. You see? They fire from extreme range, giving us hours to prepare. This is the desperation of an inferior force. Proceed with the intercept protocols. But as the minutes passed, Kelthraz began to notice something strange. His tactical officers were reporting difficulty establishing target locks on the incoming projectiles. The rounds were small, much smaller than missiles. They had no engines, no heat signatures, no active electronics. They were just chunks of dense metal moving through space. And there were so many of them. Sir, we count over 2,000 projectiles inbound. Our point defense systems are designed to handle missile swarms of a few hundred at most. Kelthraz felt the unease return, stronger now. Prioritize targets based on projected impact time. Begin defensive fire immediately. The Xynthian fleet's point defense systems came alive. Energy weapons designed to shoot down missiles and small craft began firing at the incoming projectiles. At first it seemed to work. The closest rounds were detected, tracked, and destroyed by concentrated fire. Each successful intercept was logged and celebrated. But for every projectile destroyed, 10 more continued on their paths. And the Xynthians were beginning to realize the full scope of the problem. The projectiles were not missiles. They could not be jammed or confused. They did not maneuver or evade. They simply came on in straight lines, following the laws of ballistics with perfect precision. And because they were solid metal traveling at relativistic speeds, destroying them was not as simple as with missiles. Energy weapons had to deliver enough heat to vaporize the projectile completely, because even fragments at that velocity were dangerous. The Xynthian point defense, designed for missiles that could be disabled with partial hits, struggled to put enough energy on target to completely destroy the denser, faster rounds. Sir, the tactical officer's voice had lost its earlier confidence. We cannot intercept them all. There are too many and they are too fast. I recommend we break formation and take evasive action. Kelthraz stared at the tactical display, watching the cloud of blue dots that represented incoming projectiles. His mind, trained in the doctrines of galactic warfare, struggled to adapt. This was not how space battles worked in the modern era. This was something else, something old made new again. All ships break formation. Evasive pattern delta. Maximum acceleration. The elegant geometric formation of the Xynthian fleet dissolved as each ship began taking independent evasive action. They accelerated hard, trying to be somewhere other than where the human calculations said they would be. But here was the cruel mathematics of space warfare. The projectiles had been fired based on predicted positions 3 hours in advance. If those predictions were even slightly wrong, the rounds would miss by enormous distances. But if the predictions were right, if the humans had correctly anticipated where each ship would be, then evasion came too late. The first projectile struck the destroyer Crystalline Dawn amidships. At 0.05 C, the 2-ton tungsten carbide round carried kinetic energy equivalent to 10 kilotons of TNT. The ship's shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons, provided almost no resistance to solid matter at that velocity. The round punched through the shield, through the hull, through the internal compartments and out the other side in a fraction of a second. The kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. The destroyer simply came apart, torn into pieces by forces that no structure could withstand. 300 Xynthian lives ended in an instant. 5 seconds later, 3 more ships were hit. Then 6 more. Then a dozen. The carefully calculated firing solutions were proving horrifyingly accurate. The humans had predicted not only where the ships would be, but had also calculated spread patterns, firing multiple rounds at slightly different angles to cover the most likely evasion vectors. The Xynthian fleet was not fighting a battle. They were running a gauntlet, trying to survive a hail of relativistic projectiles that had been fired hours before they even knew they were in danger. Kelthraz gripped his command chair as the harmonious unity shook from a near miss. A projectile had passed within 100 meters of his flagship, and even that was enough to cause damage from the shockwave and radiation. Damage report. Shields holding at 40%. Hull breaches on decks 6 and 7. Casualty reports coming in. Sir, we have lost 12 ships. 12 ships in less than 2 minutes. The number hit Kelthraz like a physical blow. 12 ships. The humans had destroyed 12 ships with weapons the Imperium had dismissed as primitive. He looked at the tactical display again, seeing it with new eyes. The human platforms were still out there, spread throughout the solar system, still firing. More rounds were inbound even now, fired from platforms at different ranges timed to arrive in waves. This was not a desperate last stand. This was a carefully orchestrated ambush. The humans had turned their entire solar system into an artillery kill zone. "Full retreat," Kelthraz ordered, his voice tight. "All ships, maximum acceleration away from the inner system. We need to get out of range of their weapons." But retreat was easier ordered than executed. The Xinthian ships accelerated hard, burning fuel at maximum rate. But they could not accelerate faster than the Yao projectiles that were already in flight. For the next 40 minutes, rounds continued to arrive. Each one fired from platforms at different distances. Each one timed to hit the predicted retreat vectors. The Xinthian fleet scattered, each ship taking a different heading, hoping that spreading out would make targeting harder. Some ships survived through luck or through skillful maneuvering by their captains. Others were not as fortunate. The cruiser Eternal Harmony took a direct hit that split it in two. The battle cruiser Luminous Path was struck by 3 rounds in rapid succession and disintegrated. The destroyer Swift Resolution managed to dodge 2 projectiles only to be hit by a third that had been aimed at the empty space it dodged into. By the time the surviving ships cleared the range of the outer platform ring, the Xinthian fleet had been reduced by more than half. Of the 42 ships that had entered the solar system with such confidence, only 18 remained combat capable. Another 7 were crippled, limping along with damaged engines and failing life support. The others were debris, expanding clouds of wreckage marked by the brief lives of their crews. On Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The first engagement was over. The platforms had fired according to plan, and the results exceeded even the optimistic projections. But she took no joy in the deaths. War was never something to celebrate, even when you won. She had just killed thousands of beings whose only crime was following orders and believing their leaders when they said humanity was weak. Dr. Okonkwo appeared on her screen, calling from the physics lab. "Admiral, preliminary results are even better than we hoped. Accuracy was within 2% of projections. The outer ring platforms are reloading now. They can be ready to fire again in 6 hours." Chen nodded. "The Xinthians are retreating. They will regroup and reassess. They thought this would be easy. Now they know it will not be, but they will not give up. The Imperium does not accept defeat from species they consider inferior. They will come again, and next time they will be prepared for what we can do. Then we need to be ready to show them what else we can do," Okonkwo said. Chen allowed herself a small, fierce smile. "Indeed, and I think it is time we deployed the inner system defenses. If they want Earth, they will have to run a gauntlet that makes this look like a warning shot. Get me Captain Hall and the other platform commanders. We need to discuss the next phase." Millions of kilometers away, War Master Kelthraz sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the casualty reports. 24 ships lost or crippled. Thousands of his people dead, all because he had underestimated a species that still used what he had called primitive weapons. The shame was overwhelming, but beneath the shame was something else. Fear. Real fear that humanity might actually win this fight. That thought, more than anything else, shook him to his core. But he was Xinthian. He was War Master of the Imperium, and he would not be defeated by primitives no matter how clever they were with their obsolete weapons. The fleet would rest, repair, and prepare, and then they would show the humans what true galactic military power looked like. 3 days after the first engagement, the remnants of the Xinthian fleet held position at the very edge of the solar system, far beyond the range of even humanity's longest-ranged platforms. War Master Kelthraz had used those days to reorganize his forces, treat the wounded, and most importantly, to think. The shame of his initial defeat burned in his chest, but he forced himself to analyze what had happened with cold military logic. The humans had surprised him once. He would not allow it to happen again. His tactical officers had worked around the clock, studying every piece of data from the engagement. They now understood the human strategy. The platforms were essentially massive railguns, fixed in position but capable of firing projectiles at extraordinary velocities over extreme ranges. Dangerous, yes, but also limited. Once you knew where the platforms were located, you could calculate safe approach vectors. And unlike energy weapons, kinetic projectiles took time to reach their targets, time that could be used for evasion if you were prepared. Kelthraz had also called for reinforcements. The message he sent to the Imperium was carefully worded, emphasizing the unexpected nature of the human capabilities rather than his own failure to anticipate them. Help was coming, but it would take weeks to arrive. In the meantime, he had to make a decision. Wait for reinforcements or press the attack with his remaining forces. Pride and duty demanded he continue. The Imperium did not accept defeat, especially not from newly discovered species. War Master, his senior tactical officer, approached. We have completed our analysis of the human platforms. We have identified 3,214 separate installations, distributed throughout the inner and outer solar system. However, our scans indicate they are fixed defenses. Once we plot their positions and firing arcs, we can chart an approach that minimizes our exposure. Kelthraz studied the tactical projection. His officer was right. The platforms were powerful, but they could not move. A fast approach using asteroids and orbital mechanics for cover could get his fleet close enough to Earth that the outer platforms could not fire without risking hitting the planet they were meant to defend. Once inside that defensive shell, his ships could destroy Earth's close-in defenses with conventional weapons. It was risky, but it was possible. Prepare the fleet for final assault, Kelthraz ordered. We will use a high-speed approach, maximum acceleration. Our goal is to break through to Earth orbit as quickly as possible. Once there, the humans will have to surrender or watch us reduce their homeworld to ash. And this time we will be ready for their artillery. On Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen received word of the Xinthian fleet's movements. They were coming again, as she knew they would. But this time they were coming fast, using a trajectory that minimized exposure to the outer platforms. Her tactical staff had wargamed dozens of possible Xinthian responses, and this was one they had anticipated. She allowed herself a small smile. The Xinthians were learning, but so was humanity. They think we only have the platforms, Chen said to her staff. They have been focused on counting fixed defenses. They do not know about the mobile units. Captain Marcus Hall was no longer on Longshot 7. His platform had been temporarily shut down for maintenance after its intensive firing sequence. Instead, he now commanded the ESS Stennis, a dreadnought-class warship that represented the pinnacle of human naval engineering. The Stennis was not alone. Arrayed throughout the inner solar system were 24 heavy warships, each one built around a spinal mass driver that made the platform guns look modest by comparison. These were not the ships the Xinthians had seen during their tour. Those had been standard patrol cruisers, important but not exceptional. The dreadnoughts had been kept hidden, powered down and masked among the asteroid belt's industrial facilities. They were humanity's mobile artillery, capable of matching accelerations with any ship in known space while carrying the firepower to threaten capital ships. Hall stood on the bridge of the Stennis, watching his crew perform final checks on the main gun. The weapon ran the entire length of the ship, nearly 800 meters of electromagnetic coils and focusing systems. It could fire a 50-ton projectile at 0.1 C, 10% of light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy was incomprehensible. A single hit would not just destroy a ship, it would vaporize it. Captain Hall, Chen's face appeared on his main screen. The Xinthians are beginning their approach. They are using a fast transit, trying to minimize exposure to our outer defenses. Your task force will intercept them at the asteroid belt. Do not engage until they are committed to their approach vector. I want them deep in the kill zone before they know you are there. Hall acknowledged the order. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. Many of them were veterans like him, people who had served in the belt during the corporate wars. They understood space combat at a level that came from experience, not just training. They knew that in the vast emptiness between worlds, patience was as important as firepower. The Xinthian fleet came like a spear thrust, 18 warships in a tight formation accelerating at the maximum rate their engines could sustain. They moved fast enough that relativistic effects became noticeable. Time dilation measurably different between them and the stationary human platforms. Kelthraz watched the distance counter decrease, counting down the time until they would reach Earth. His point defense systems were at maximum readiness, prepared to intercept any incoming projectiles. His shields were configured to absorb as much kinetic energy as possible, their settings adjusted based on hard lessons from the first engagement. Sir, we are approaching the asteroid belt, his navigation officer reported. Recommend reducing speed to avoid collisions with uncharted objects. Kelthraz considered it, but the tactical display showed he was still within extreme range of the outer platforms. Maintain speed. Our shields can handle any small debris. I want to minimize our exposure time. That decision would prove costly. The Xinthian sensors were focused outward, watching for platforms and projectiles. They were not paying attention to what appeared to be ordinary asteroids. So when those asteroids suddenly lit up with active sensors and began moving, it took precious seconds for the Xinthians to understand what was happening. Contact. Multiple contacts, sir. Reading 18, no. 24 vessels accelerating from the asteroid field. They were hiding among the rocks, powered down. Sir, they are moving to intercept. Kelthras felt his blood turn cold. Mobile units. The humans had mobile artillery platforms. His intelligence had assured him that humanity's navy consisted of small patrol vessels and system defense boats. Nothing that could threaten a Xinthian warship in open combat. But the vessels now accelerating toward his fleet were clearly capital ships, massive and purpose-built for exactly this kind of engagement. All ships, combat formation, prepare to engage the human vessels. The human dreadnoughts spread out into a wide formation, each ship taking a position that gave it clear firing lanes while maintaining mutual support. They did not rush forward to meet the Xinthians. Instead, they matched vectors, accelerating at an angle that would bring them alongside the Xinthian formation rather than head-on. It was the same principle used by sailing ships in Earth's ancient naval battles. Crossing the T, positioning to fire broadsides while minimizing the enemy's ability to return fire. All ships, Hall broadcast to the human fleet, pick your targets. Fire when ready. The Stennis fired first. The spinal mass driver released its projectile with a flash of exotic particles and waste heat that lit up every sensor in the area. The 50-ton tungsten carbide round, shaped like a dart and spinning for stability, accelerated down the length of the ship and launched at point 1C. It covered the distance to its target in less than 5 seconds. The Xinthian cruiser Radiant Dawn had no time to evade. Its shields flashed once, briefly, before the projectile punched through them as if they were not there. The round hit the cruiser just aft of center mass, and the result was catastrophic. At point 1C, the kinetic energy was so immense that the round did not just penetrate the ship. It created a shock wave that propagated through the entire structure, faster than the ship's material could respond. The cruiser came apart from the inside out, blown into fragments by forces that exceeded anything its designers had imagined possible. Before the debris had finished expanding, 5 more human dreadnoughts fired. 5 more Xinthian ships died, their shields and armor useless against the relativistic impacts. The Xinthian formation, so tight and disciplined moments before, shattered as captains desperately took evasive action. "Return fire," Kelthras screamed. "All ships target those dreadnoughts." The Xinthian warships opened fire with their plasma lances and disruptor beams. At closer ranges, these weapons were devastating, capable of cutting through most known materials with ease. But the human ships were still thousands of kilometers away, at ranges where energy weapons dissipated and lost effectiveness. The shots that did reach their targets splashed against human shields and armor, causing damage but not destruction, and the human ships kept firing. Unlike the platforms, which had to worry about heat buildup and power consumption, the dreadnoughts had massive reactors and sophisticated cooling systems. They could fire repeatedly, and their accuracy at close range was terrifying. The Stennis fired its second round, then its third. Each shot was carefully aimed, each one found its mark. Hall watched the tactical display with grim focus. "Target the battleship, the big one in the center. All nearby ships concentrate fire. Let us see what it takes to bring down their flagship." 4 human dreadnoughts adjusted their aim, targeting the Harmonious Unity. Kelthras's flagship was the most heavily armored and shielded vessel in the Xinthian fleet, built to withstand sustained combat. It had never faced anything like this. The first round hit the forward shield generators, overloading them and leaving a gap in the defensive screen. The second round hit 3 seconds later, punching through that gap and into the armor belt. The third round hit almost the same spot, penetrating deep into the ship's interior. The fourth round hit the weakened section and broke through entirely, its passage through the ship causing secondary explosions that tore apart internal compartments. Kelthras felt his ship dying around him. Alarms screamed. Crew members called out damage reports. The lights flickered as power systems failed. He gripped his command chair and made a decision he had never thought he would have to make. "All ships retreat. Scatter and retreat. We cannot win this fight." The remaining Xinthian ships needed no encouragement. They broke off their attack run, each vessel taking a different vector away from Earth. The human dreadnoughts did not pursue. They had achieved their objective, breaking the Xinthian assault. Instead, they maintained their positions, ready to fire again if any enemy ship attempted another approach. Captain Hall watched the Xinthians flee and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His grandfather had served on aircraft carriers back when nations fought with jets and missiles over Earth's oceans. The old man had told stories about naval warfare, about positioning and timing, about using your strengths against the enemy's weaknesses. Hall had listened to those stories and learned from them. Space was just a bigger ocean, and the principles of warfare remained the same. On Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen tallied the results of the second engagement. The Xinthians had lost another 8 ships, including their flagship, which was now crippled and would likely not survive the journey home. Of the 42 ships that had entered the solar system, only 10 remained combat effective. It was a decisive victory by any measure, but Chen knew the war was not over. The Xinthians would send more ships, better prepared and in greater numbers. This was just the beginning. Dr. Okonkwo joined her in the observation deck, looking out at the distant stars. "We won," she said softly. "They called our weapons primitive and we won," Chen nodded. "We won this battle. But the Xinthian Imperium controls hundreds of worlds. They can replace their losses. We need to make sure this victory means something. We need to show the galaxy that humanity earned our place not through luck, but through capability. We need to show them that old ways, when perfected, can defeat new arrogance." Far away, in the wreckage of his command chair, War Master Kelthraz made a different vow. He had underestimated the humans twice. There would not be a third time. He would bring such force against this primitive species that their clever weapons would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Imperium would have its victory no matter the cost. But even as he made that vow, a small doubt crept into his mind. What else had the humans not shown him? What other surprises were waiting in the depths of this unremarkable solar system? For the first time in his long military career, Kelthraz understood what it meant to fear an enemy. The final assault came 3 months later. The Xinthian Imperium, stung by its humiliating defeats, gathered a force that was meant to overwhelm any possible defense. 200 warships drawn from a dozen different fleets converged on the Sol system. This time there would be no diplomatic niceties, no offers of protectorate status. The humans would be crushed, their defenses shattered, and Earth would serve as an example to any other species that might think to resist the Imperium's will. War Master Kelthraz was not leading this fleet. He had been recalled to the homeworld to explain his failures. In his place was Grand Admiral Vethris, a veteran of 30 campaigns and a commander who did not underestimate enemies. Vethris had studied the human tactics carefully. She understood now that the humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapons platform, using physics and mathematics to offset their technological disadvantages. It was clever. It was even impressive. But cleverness had limits, and she had brought enough force to exceed those limits. The Xinthian Armada entered the solar system in 3 waves, separated by time and space. The first wave would draw human fire, map their defensive positions, and absorb their initial salvos. The second wave would exploit gaps in the human coverage. The third wave would deliver the killing blow to Earth itself. It was a plan built on the assumption that humans, like all species, had limited resources. Eventually, they would run out of ammunition, power, or both. On Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen watched the massive enemy fleet approach and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. 3 months of preparation had given humanity time to build more platforms, deploy more dreadnoughts, and refine their tactics. But 200 ships was an overwhelming force. Even with all of humanity's advantages, the numbers were daunting. This would be the decisive battle. If they lost, Earth would fall. If they won, the galaxy would have to recognize humanity as a power to be respected. She opened a channel to every human military installation, every ship, every platform. "This is Admiral Chen Wei commanding Earth's defense forces. You all know what we face. An armada that outnumbers us 10 to 1, led by commanders who have learned from their earlier defeats. They expect us to fight the same way we did before. They expect us to run out of ammunition and collapse under sustained assault. They have underestimated us again, but this time in a different way. They think quantity is their advantage. They do not know about the final surprise we have been saving. All stations stand ready, and remember, we are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for humanity's future in the stars. Chen out. The first Xinthian wave crossed into the outer solar system, and the human platforms opened fire exactly as expected. Thousands of projectiles streaked through space, and the Xinthians were ready for them this time. Their ships moved in irregular patterns, making targeting harder. Their point defense systems had been upgraded specifically to handle relativistic projectiles. They lost ships, yes, but fewer than before. The first wave pushed deeper into the system, drawing more fire, mapping the location of every human platform. Captain Marcus Hall, still commanding the Stennis, waited with his task force near Mars. They had not fired yet, conserving their position and ammunition. His orders were clear: wait until the enemy was committed, then strike at the most vulnerable point. He watched the tactical display, seeing the first Xinthian wave absorbing punishment but continuing forward. Behind them, the second wave was entering the system, and behind that the third wave, the largest of all. They are good, Hall muttered. They learned. They are not making the same mistakes. His tactical officer nodded, but Admiral Chen said, "We have a surprise for them." "Do you know what it is, sir?" Hall smiled grimly. "I know. And when they see it, they are going to wish they had stayed home." The Xinthian first wave reached the asteroid belt, the same killing ground where the human dreadnoughts had ambushed them before. Grand Admiral Vethris watched carefully, expecting the human capital ships to reveal themselves. When they did, emerging from hiding spots among the asteroids, she was ready. The first wave opened fire with everything they had, concentrating their energy weapons on the human dreadnoughts. The ranges were closer this time, close enough for Xinthian weapons to be truly effective. The human ships took damage, their shields flaring under the sustained bombardment. 2 dreadnoughts were forced to withdraw, their armor breached and systems failing. But the remaining ships continued to fire, their mass drivers hurling projectiles that turned Xinthian warships into expanding clouds of debris. It was a brutal exchange, and both sides were taking losses. But the numbers favored the Xinthians. For every one of their ships destroyed, the humans lost precious defensive assets they could not replace. "Second wave, advance," Vethris ordered. "Exploit the gaps in their formation. All ships target the human capital vessels. We will break their mobile forces, then crush their fixed defenses at our leisure." The second Xinthian wave accelerated forward, moving to surround and overwhelm the human dreadnoughts. It was working. The humans were being forced back, their formations breaking under the weight of numbers. Vethris allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had fought well, better than most species would have against such odds, but they were losing. In another hour, Earth would be defenseless. That was when the moon opened fire. Humanity's moon had been fortified in secret over the past 3 months. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in caverns and tunnels that had been excavated by mining equipment, humanity had built something unprecedented. The largest mass drivers ever constructed, weapons so powerful that firing them caused seismic events across the lunar surface. These were not precision weapons. They were siege guns designed for one purpose: to fire projectiles so large and so fast that nothing could survive their impact. The lunar batteries fired in sequence, their launches spaced seconds apart to avoid interfering with each other. Each projectile weighed over 500 tons. Each one was accelerated to 0.2 c, 20% of light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy of a single round exceeded that of the largest nuclear weapons humanity had ever built. And there were 18 of these weapons, arranged in clusters across the lunar surface. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo stood in the main lunar firing control center, watching the power reading spike as the first battery discharged. The temperature in the firing chamber reached levels that would vaporize any normal material. Only the exotic matter shielding, purchased at enormous cost from Earth's industrial capacity, kept the guns from destroying themselves with each shot. The calculations for these weapons had taken months to perfect. The engineering challenges had seemed impossible, but humanity had done it anyway, driven by the knowledge that their survival depended on it. The first projectile hit the lead ship of the Xinthian second wave. The battleship Eternal Dominion was the most powerful vessel in the Xinthian fleet after the flagship, a mobile fortress that had never been defeated in combat. It ceased to exist. The kinetic energy of the impact was so immense that it did not just destroy the ship. It created a brief artificial star, a flash of released energy that was visible from Earth's surface. The shockwave propagated outward, damaging or destroying every ship within 1,000 kilometers. 5 seconds later, the second lunar projectile struck, then the third, then the fourth. Each shot targeted not a single ship, but the densest concentration of enemy vessels. Each impact created destruction on a scale that made the earlier battles seem like skirmishes. The Xinthian second wave, which moments before had been confidently advancing to victory, found itself fighting for survival against weapons that seemed to defy reason. Grand Admiral Vethris stared at her tactical display in horror. Entire squadrons were simply gone, erased by impacts that registered on her sensors like small supernovas. Where are those shots coming from? The moon, Admiral. The human moon. Sir, they have turned it into a weapons platform. The energy readings are, sir, we have never seen anything like this. Each shot carries more destructive force than our ships can withstand. Vethris felt her certainty crumble. The humans had done it again. They had hidden their most powerful weapons until the critical moment. She had brought 200 ships, confident that numbers would overwhelm any defense. But what did numbers matter against weapons that could destroy multiple ships with each shot? Third wave, do not advance. I repeat, do not advance. All ships begin withdrawal. We need to get beyond the range of those lunar weapons. But the lunar guns had one more feature that Vethris did not know about. They could track and predict. The targeting computers, built by Dr. Okonkwo's teams, used the same principles that had made the first engagement so successful. They calculated where the retreating ships would be, not where they were now, and they fired accordingly. The Xinthian retreat turned into a rout. Ships scattered in all directions, each captain making their own decision about which direction offered the best chance of survival. The lunar batteries continued to fire, their shots spaced to account for reload times but still coming with terrible regularity. Each impact destroyed ships and shattered formations. The Xinthian third wave, which had not even entered the inner solar system, turned around and fled before engaging at all. Captain Hall watched from the Stennis as the most powerful fleet the Xinthian Imperium had ever assembled broke apart under the lunar bombardment. He thought about the War Master's words during that first tour, the casual dismissal of human weapons as primitive and obsolete. He thought about how the galaxy had looked down on humanity for clinging to kinetic weapons when everyone else had moved on to energy-based systems. And he thought about something his grandfather had once said. New is not always better. Sometimes the old way works because it is based on truths that never change. Gravity does not become obsolete. Mass does not become outdated. And when you throw something hard enough, nothing can stop it. The battle lasted another 3 hours, but the outcome was decided in those first minutes of lunar fire. By the time Grand Admiral Vethris managed to rally her surviving ships and retreat beyond the range of human weapons, she had lost over half her fleet. 130 ships destroyed or crippled. Tens of thousands of Xinthian lives ended. It was the worst military defeat the Imperium had suffered in living memory. On Earth, people watched the sky and saw brief, distant flashes that marked the end of ships and lives. When news came that the Xinthians were retreating, that Earth was safe, the celebrations began. But on Gibraltar platform, Admiral Chen did not celebrate. She had won, yes, but at a cost that weighed heavily on her conscience. She had killed so many. Necessary, perhaps, but still a burden she would carry. Dr. Okonkwo found her in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. We did it, the physicist said quietly. We showed them that physics does not take sides. That old principles properly applied can defeat any opponent. Chen nodded slowly. We did, and now the galaxy knows what happens when you underestimate humanity. But Sarah, what comes next? We have made enemies of a galactic empire. We have proven we can defend ourselves, but can we build a future from this? 3 months after the battle, a different ship entered the Sol system. This one came alone, flying flags of peace and broadcasting messages of diplomatic intent. It was not Xinthian. It was from the Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw relations between the major powers. Admiral Chen met with their representatives personally, on neutral ground aboard a station in Earth orbit. The Council's lead diplomat was a being of soft purple light and geometric patterns, speaking through translation devices in a voice like crystal chimes. Admiral Chen Wei, humanity has earned the attention of the Council. Your defeat of the Xinthian Imperium's forces was unexpected. The Xinthians have formally requested arbitration of your conflict. Chen kept her expression neutral. And what is the Council's position? The Council recognizes that the Xinthian Imperium initiated hostilities and that humanity acted in self-defense. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership in the galactic community, with all rights and protections that entails. The Xinthians will be required to formally apologize and pay reparations for their unprovoked aggression. Chen felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Full membership, not as vassals or protectorates, but as equals. On behalf of humanity, we accept. But we have conditions. The diplomat's pattern shifted in what might have been surprise. Conditions? Yes, first, we want access to the Council's technological database. Second, we want humanity's defense methods to be studied and shared with other member species. And third, we want a formal guarantee that no species will face the same ultimatum that was delivered to Earth. The diplomat was silent for a long moment. Then the pattern shifted to something that seemed like respect. Your conditions are acceptable. The Council is particularly interested in your weapons technology. Our military analysts tell us that your approach to kinetic weapons represents a significant advancement in the field. Several member species have already expressed interest in developing similar systems. Over the following years, humanity's integration into galactic society proceeded rapidly. Human engineers and physicists found themselves in high demand, teaching other species the principles they had perfected. The term human solution entered the galactic lexicon, used to describe any approach that solved a complex problem through elegant application of fundamental principles rather than advanced technology. The Xinthian Imperium underwent its own transformation. The disastrous campaign against Earth had shaken their confidence and forced a re-evaluation of their military doctrines. War Master Kelthraz, surprisingly, became an advocate for reform, using his experience to teach younger officers about the dangers of arrogance and assumption. He and Admiral Chen eventually met at a council conference and shared a brief, respectful conversation between former enemies. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo won the Galactic Prize for Physics for her work on relativistic kinetic weapons. In her acceptance speech, she said something that was quoted across 1,000 worlds. The universe runs on mathematics. Mass times velocity squared does not care about your technology level. Gravity does not check your species before it pulls you down. We did not defeat the Xinthians because we were more advanced. We defeated them because we understood that the laws of physics are the same for everyone, and we were willing to take those laws to their logical extremes. Admiral Chen eventually retired from military service and became Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She used her position to ensure that humanity's integration into galactic society proceeded on terms of equality and mutual respect. But she never forgot the lesson of those desperate battles. That strength comes not just from technology, but from ingenuity, determination, and the willingness to see value in things others dismiss. On Earth's moon, the massive lunar batteries were left in place but never fired again in anger. They became a memorial and a museum, a reminder of the time when humanity proved that old ways, refined and perfected, could stand against any threat. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the weapons that had changed the balance of power in their civilization, and they left with a new respect for the species that still called Earth home. The inscription at the Lunar Memorial summed it up simply. They called our weapons primitive. We called them physics. Physics 1. The stars looked different from the observation deck of the Kelvari research vessel. They had been studying this small blue planet for 3 orbital cycles now, and Captain Zex was growing impatient. His gray skin wrinkled around his large eyes as he stared at the viewscreen. Scientist Mur, what have you learned about these primitives? Captain Zex asked. Scientist Mur's thin fingers danced across the control panel. They call themselves humans. Their technology is crude. They have only reached their own moon and sent simple probes to nearby planets. They fight among themselves, constantly. Captain Zex nodded. This was typical of young species. The Kelvari Imperium had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had seen hundreds of developing species come and go. Some were allowed to join the Imperium as servants. Others were wiped out if they posed any threat. They seem harmless enough, Captain Zex said, but the Council wants specimens for study. Select 5 individuals and bring them aboard. Scientist. Mur bowed. It will be done. On Earth, Alan Nelson sat at his control station in the Earth Defense Force headquarters. The EDF was a small organization, created after nations finally put aside their differences following the climate wars of the 2120s. Alan was 35 years old with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had been working double shifts all week because something strange kept appearing on the long-range sensors. "Sir, I'm picking up that anomaly again," Alan said to his supervisor. Colonel Joe Barnes walked over and looked at the screen. "Still think it's a ship?" "Yes, sir. The pattern is too regular to be natural. Something is up there watching us." Colonel Barnes sighed. "Nelson, we've been over this. If aliens existed and had the technology to reach Earth, they would have made contact by now." "With respect, sir, not if they were studying us first," Alan replied. Before the colonel could answer, the alarm sounded. The anomaly was moving, coming closer to Earth. At the same time, Samantha Wright was jogging through a park in Portland. She was 28, athletic, with her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. As a lieutenant in the Air Force, she stayed in shape even on her days off. She stopped to catch her breath and looked up at the night sky. A faint blue light caught her attention. It was moving too fast to be a plane, too controlled to be a meteor. As she watched, it seemed to grow larger. Suddenly, Samantha felt a strange, tingling sensation. The world around her blurred. When her vision cleared, she was standing in a metal room with curved walls and strange symbols on the surfaces. Two tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large eyes stared at her. "Subject secured," one said in a strange, clicking language that somehow translated in her mind. Samantha's military training kicked in. She controlled her fear and quickly assessed her situation. She was in some kind of cell, with a transparent barrier separating her from the aliens. 4 other humans were in similar cells nearby. They looked terrified. "What do you want with us?" Samantha asked calmly. The aliens seemed surprised that she could speak. One of them approached the barrier. "You will be studied," it said. "Your species is primitive but interesting. My name is Lieutenant Samantha Wright. I demand you return us to Earth immediately," she said firmly. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Demands? You are in no position to make demands. Human, you are specimens now." Samantha noticed that when the alien spoke, a small device on its neck glowed. Some kind of translator, she guessed. She also saw that the transparent barrier had a control panel beside it. Back on Earth, Alan Nelson was tracking the alien ship's movements. "Sir, it's taken up position in high orbit, and I'm getting reports of people disappearing in flashes of blue light." Colonel Barnes was on the phone immediately, reporting to his superiors. The world's military forces went on high alert. On the alien ship, Samantha was watching the guards carefully. They seemed overconfident, barely paying attention to their prisoners. She had noticed that the barriers flickered slightly when the aliens passed through them. There must be a way to disrupt them. In the cell next to her was a young man who had introduced himself as Pete Garcia, an electronics engineer. Samantha got his attention and whispered her observations about the barrier and the translation devices. Pete nodded. "I think those translator devices might be using some kind of electromagnetic field. If we could create a surge." The aliens returned, pushing floating trays of equipment into the room. "Preparation for testing will begin," one announced. As they approached Samantha's cell, she pretended to collapse. The aliens paused, then entered her cell to examine her. As they bent over, she sprang up, grabbing the translator device from one alien's neck. She smashed it against the floor, causing a spark that momentarily disrupted the barrier field. "Now!" she shouted to the others. Pete and the others rushed their barriers at the same moment. The fields flickered and failed. Chaos erupted as the humans escaped their cells. The aliens were physically weaker than the humans, not used to physical confrontation. Samantha quickly subdued one guard while Pete grabbed what looked like a weapon from another. "We need to find a way to contact Earth," Samantha said, examining the alien technology around her. Pete nodded. Already working on a control panel he had opened. "Their systems are advanced, but I recognize some basic principles," he said. "If I can reconfigure this communication array..." The ship's alarms began to sound. More aliens would be coming soon. 2 of the other prisoners stood guard at the door while Samantha helped Pete. "I think I've got it," Pete said finally. "It's sending on all Earth frequencies. Simple distress signal with our coordinates." Scientist Murr rushed into the security center, alarmed by the warnings flashing across the screens. "Captain, the specimens have escaped containment. They've disabled 2 guards and accessed our communications array." Captain Zex couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Impossible. Recapture them immediately and block all transmissions." But it was too late. The signal had already been sent. On Earth, Alan Nelson watched as his equipment picked up a strange transmission. "Sir, we're receiving a signal. It's coming from the anomaly, but it's using our own emergency frequency." Colonel Barnes leaned forward. "What does it say?" Alan listened to the message, his eyes widening. "It's Lieutenant Wright from the Air Force. She says they've been abducted by aliens and they're fighting back." The room fell silent. Then Colonel Barnes straightened his uniform. "It appears we're not alone in the universe after all, and it seems we've just made first contact." In space, the Kelvari ship hovered, its occupants completely unaware that they had just picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The news of alien contact spread across Earth like wildfire. Governments that once fought each other now held emergency meetings. Within days, the United Nations called for a global response plan. Colonel Barnes stood before the hastily assembled Earth Defense Council, a group of military leaders from every major nation. "Lieutenant Wright's signal confirmed what we suspected. We are not alone and the aliens have hostile intent," he said. Alan Nelson sat nearby, operating a display that showed the alien ship's position. "They're still in orbit. Our satellites can now track them since we know what to look for." General Susan Carter of the United States nodded. "What are our options? We can't reach them with our current weapons." "We don't need to," Alan said. "Lieutenant Wright and the other abductees are fighting back from the inside. If we can establish reliable communication, we can coordinate." On the Kelvari ship, Samantha and Pete had been recaptured after sending their message. They were in a more secure holding area now, along with the 3 other humans: Greg Bell, a construction worker, Olivia Kim, a doctor, and Frank Miller, a retired police officer. Scientist Murr circled them, clearly upset. "Your behavior is not normal for primitive species. You should be cowering in fear." "Sorry to disappoint you," Samantha said. "Humans don't cower well." Murr made some notes on a clear tablet. "The High Council must be informed of this. Your species may require further evaluation." After Murr left, Samantha turned to the others. "They underestimate us. That's our advantage." Frank nodded. "I noticed their security systems have patterns. The guards change every 6 hours. The door fields flicker when they bring food. I managed to get a look at their ship schematics when I was at the control panel." Pete added quietly. "This vessel is just a research ship. There are much bigger ones out there." Olivia, who had been examining the strange food they'd been given, looked up. "They're studying our biology too. I saw tests being prepared. They want to know our weaknesses. Then we need to learn about them first," Samantha said. Back on Earth, the first major decision of the newly formed Earth Defense Force was to reveal the truth to the public. Instead of panic, the news of alien contact created a wave of unity, unlike anything seen before. Dr. Jake Collins watched the announcement from his laboratory at MIT. He was 40 years old with dark hair graying at the temples. As one of the world's leading physicists, he had always believed in extraterrestrial life. Now he had proof. His phone rang. It was an official from the EDF. "Dr. Collins, we need your expertise. A team is being assembled to analyze alien technology and develop countermeasures. Will you join us?" Jake didn't hesitate. "I'll be on the next flight." In space, the Kelvari ship's commander received a transmission from the Imperium High Council. "Captain Zex, your report is disturbing," said High Commander Vox. "This species shows unusual resistance. The Council requires more information before deciding their fate." "What are your orders, High Commander?" asked Captain Zex. "Send a clear message. These humans must understand the power they face. There is a small settlement on their 4th planet. Destroy it as a demonstration." Captain Zex bowed. "It will be done." The Kelvari ship moved away from Earth, heading toward Mars. The humans in captivity felt the change in the ship's movement. "Something's happening," Pete said. Through a small viewport in their cell, they could see Mars growing larger. The red planet now hosted Hope Colony, the first permanent human settlement beyond Earth with a population of nearly 3,000 people. "They're headed for Mars," Samantha realized with horror. "We need to warn them." On Earth, Alan noticed the change in the alien ship's trajectory. "Sir, they're moving toward Mars." Colonel Barnes immediately contacted Mars. "Hope Colony, this is Earth Defense Force. You have an unidentified spacecraft approaching. Begin emergency evacuation procedures immediately." But it was too late. The Kelvari ship fired a single energy pulse at the Mars colony. In an instant, the dome structures cracked and shattered, exposing the inhabitants to the harsh Martian atmosphere. 3,000 lives extinguished in minutes. Earth watched in horror as the first human settlement on another world was destroyed. On the Kelvari ship, the human prisoners saw the destruction through the viewport. Greg slammed his fists against the barrier. Frank closed his eyes in silent prayer. Olivia sobbed quietly. Samantha turned to see Captain Zex watching their reactions. "This is what happens to species who resist the Imperium," the alien said through his translator. "Your world will submit or face similar consequences." "You've made a mistake," Samantha said, her voice calm despite her rage. "You think this will frighten us into submission. But humans don't work that way." "We will see," Zex replied. The response from Earth was swift. Nations that once pointed nuclear weapons at each other now united their military forces. The Earth Defense Force became a global priority overnight. Resources poured into research and defense. At the EDF headquarters, Jake Collins examined the data collected from the alien ship's transmissions. "They're using a form of quantum communication," he explained to Colonel Barnes and Alan. "It operates on principles I've only theorized about, but I think we can adapt our satellite network to disrupt it." "How long will it take?" Barnes asked. "With global cooperation?" "Weeks instead of years," Jake replied. The Kelvari ship returned to Earth orbit, expecting to find a planet ready to surrender. Instead, they found something unexpected. Their scans detected unusual activity. Satellites being repositioned, energy signatures changing. "Captain, the humans are altering their defense systems," reported the Kelvari tactical officer. "They appear to be adapting their primitive technology." Captain Zex frowned. "Impossible. They cannot understand our technology." "Nevertheless, something is happening," the officer insisted. In the holding cells, the human prisoners had been developing their own plans. Frank had been systematically testing the barriers, finding weak points. Olivia had been analyzing the aliens' physiology by careful observation, noting that they seemed sensitive to certain light frequencies. Pete had managed to remove a small component from their food delivery system, a simple act that went unnoticed, but gave him materials to work with. The Kelvari were so confident in their superiority that they failed to notice these small acts of resistance. On the 30th day of captivity, Earth made its move. Under Admiral Lisa Hernandez's command, Earth launched its first coordinated attack. It wasn't much, just 3 space vessels hastily upgraded with technologies based on Jake's research. "All ships maintain formation," Admiral Hernandez ordered, from the bridge of the EDF Defiance. "Activate disruption fields on my mark." The small Earth fleet approached the much larger Kelvari vessel. The alien ship fired warning shots, confident that their advanced weapons would destroy the primitive Earth vessels easily. But when they fired, something unexpected happened. Their energy weapons dispersed harmlessly against the Earth ship's shields. Shields based on technology Jake had developed from studying the Kelvari transmissions. "Impossible," Captain Zex shouted as the Earth ships closed in. The humans had done what the Kelvari thought impossible. They had adapted. They had learned. And now, they were fighting back. The most dangerous species in the galaxy had been provoked, and they were just getting started. The 3 Earth ships circled the larger Kelvari vessel. Admiral Hernandez watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the alien ship tried to target them again. Once more, the energy weapons dispersed against their shields. "Their weapons can't penetrate our defenses," reported her tactical officer. "Dr. Collins's adaptation of their technology is working." Hernandez nodded. "Launch the rescue pods. Commander Ramirez, you're up." On the lower deck, Commander Peter Ramirez and his special operations team prepared to board the alien vessel. They wore black armor enhanced with the new technology. Each carried weapons designed based on Jake's research. "Remember, our priority is rescuing our people," Ramirez told his team. "We go in fast and quiet." The small pods launched from the Earthships, speeding toward the Kelvari vessel. On board the alien ship, alarms sounded. "Captain, the humans are attempting to board us," the tactical officer reported. Captain Zex stared at the view screen in disbelief. "Impossible. No primitive species has ever dared attack an Imperial vessel." In the holding cells, Samantha and the other prisoners heard the alarms. Frank looked up from the device he and Pete had been secretly building from stolen parts. "Something's happening," he said. Samantha moved to the viewport. Through it, she could see the Earth vessels. "They came for us," she whispered. Pete finished, connecting the final wire on their device. "Well, we should give them a proper welcome then." He activated the device. It emitted a high-pitched frequency that made the aliens in the corridor outside clutch their heads in pain. The barriers flickered and failed. "Now!" Samantha shouted. The prisoners rushed out as Ramirez's team breached the hull nearby. The humans met in the corridor, both groups surprised to see each other. "Lieutenant Wright?" Ramirez asked. Samantha saluted. "Commander, your timing is perfect. We need to move. This ship is calling for reinforcements," Ramirez said. As they made their way toward the escape pods, they passed the ship's data center. Pete stopped. "Wait. We should take their data. It could help Earth prepare." Ramirez hesitated, then nodded to one of his tech specialists. "Do it, 2 minutes, no more." While they downloaded the Kelvari data, Captain Zex was on the command deck sending an urgent message to the Imperium. "Hi, Commander, we are under attack. The humans have weapons that can block our energy cannons. They are boarding our vessel." "Hi." Commander Vox's image flickered on the screen. "This is unexpected. How have they adapted so quickly?" "Unknown, High Commander. They should not be capable of understanding our technology. Yet they seem to have reversed some of our systems." Vox's expression darkened. "You have failed, Captain Zex. The Council will be informed. Retreat now and return to Imperial space." As the Kelvari crew prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Ramirez's team and the freed prisoners reached the escape pods. The ship shuddered as its engines powered up. "We need to go now," Ramirez shouted. They launched the pods just as the Kelvari ship disappeared in a flash of light. Admiral Hernandez ordered the Earth vessels to retrieve the pods. Back on Earth, the small victory was celebrated, but military leaders knew it was just the beginning. The data stolen from the Kelvari ship confirmed their worst fears. Jake Collins examined the information in the EDF laboratory. Alan Nelson stood nearby, watching as the physicist worked. "It's worse than we thought," Jake said. "Their empire controls hundreds of star systems. They've conquered dozens of other species. And now they'll come for us in force," Alan said. Jake nodded grimly. "But the data also gives us an advantage. We can see how their technology works, how their society functions. They've never faced a species that could adapt like we can." In a secure medical facility, Dr. Emma Davidson studied the alien biology. She was 30 years old, with dark skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been called in to examine samples retrieved from the Kelvari ship. "Their physiology is fascinating," she told General Carter. "They're physically weaker than humans, but their brains are larger. They process information differently." "Any weaknesses we can exploit?" the general asked. Emma pointed to her screen. "Several. They're sensitive to certain sound frequencies, as the prisoners discovered. Their vision is primarily adapted to see in low-light conditions. Bright flashes disorient them." General Carter smiled. "Good work, Doctor. This will help us plan our defense." In the weeks that followed, Earth prepared for war. Factories that once built cars now produced spacecraft parts. Scientists from rival nations worked together, sharing discoveries and innovations. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Kelvari High Council was in session. The Great Chamber held the leaders of the Imperium, surrounded by displays showing the human world. "This species presents an unexpected threat," High Commander Vox said. "They adapt too quickly. They resist when they should submit." Council Elder Lear, the oldest and wisest of the Kelvari, leaned forward. "In 1,000 years, no species has ever taken an Imperial vessel by surprise. These humans are different. They must be eliminated," another council member said. "Before they become a true threat," High Commander Vox nodded. "I agree. I will lead the fleet personally. We will show these humans the full might of the Imperium." The Kelvari assembled their armada, 300 warships, each many times larger than the research vessel, prepared to jump to Earth's solar system. On Earth, the stolen data allowed the defense forces to detect the coming attack. Admiral Hernandez called an emergency meeting with the world's military leaders. "They're coming with everything they have," she said. 300 ships, heavily armed. We have 12. "Can we evacuate?" asked one general. "To where?" Hernandez replied. "No, we stand and fight." Commander Ramirez presented his plan. "They expect us to fight conventionally, to meet force with force. But humans have always excelled at unconventional warfare." He displayed a map of the solar system. "We use the asteroid belt as cover. Hit-and-run attacks, never engage directly. Use their expectations against them." Jake Collins spoke next. "We've adapted more of their technology. We've created devices that can disrupt their communications, confuse their sensors." Admiral Hernandez looked around the room. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. But remember what they don't know. They've picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Major Kevin Walsh, a communications specialist, raised his hand. "I have an idea for psychological warfare. The data we stole shows the Kelvari have never experienced it before." As the humans prepared their defenses, the Kelvari armada emerged. From faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, High Commander Vox surveyed the scene from his flagship. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show no mercy." The Kelvari ships moved forward confidently, their commanders certain of an easy victory. They had no idea what awaited them. The most adaptable species in the galaxy was ready to fight for its survival, and they would not go quietly. The Kelvari armada entered the solar system with overwhelming force. 300 warships against Earth's 12 defenders. The odds seemed impossible. Admiral Hernandez watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the enemy approached. Earth's small fleet was hidden among the asteroids between Mars and Jupiter. "All ships maintain radio silence," she ordered. "Remember the plan." The plan was unlike anything in conventional warfare. It was a human plan, born from millennia of fighting other humans. The Kelvari had never experienced anything like it. As the alien fleet moved past the asteroid belt toward Earth, they detected no resistance. High Commander Vox smiled in satisfaction. "The humans hide," he said. "They know they cannot win." Then, without warning, 5 small Earth ships darted from behind different asteroids. They fired not at the Kelvari ships, but at nearby asteroids, changing their trajectories. Dozens of massive space rocks suddenly moved toward the Kelvari fleet. "Evasive action," Vox shouted. The large alien warships tried to move, but they were too slow and too close together. Several smaller vessels were crushed by asteroids. Others collided with each other in their panic to avoid the unexpected attack. The Earth ships disappeared back into the asteroid field before the Kelvari could target them. High Commander Vox growled in frustration. "Find those ships, they cannot hide forever." But the humans had no intention of hiding forever. Their strategy was to strike and retreat, again and again from different directions. On Earth, General Maria Rodriguez oversaw Operation Firewall from the main defense headquarters. The planet's surface now bristled with defensive weapons adapted from Kelvari technology. "Dr. Collins' report," she said into her comm unit. Jake's voice came through, tired but determined. "The final modifications to the prototype are complete. If Captain Harrison's team can place it on their command ship, it should work. Should? The general asked. It's based on their own technology, but we've added something they'd never think of, Jake replied. Something uniquely human. Nearby, Samantha Wright and Alan Nelson worked with Dr. Emma Davidson, preparing for the next phase of the plan. After their rescue from the Kelvari ship, they had become key members of the Earth Defense Force. The data we stole shows their entire fleet connects through a quantum communication network, Alan explained. They share targeting data, tactical updates, everything. Which makes their coordination perfect, Samantha added, until someone disrupts that network. In space, the battle continued. The Kelvari fleet pushed forward despite the harassment from Earth ships. They were now approaching the orbit of Earth's moon. Captain Steve Harrison prepared his small team aboard the stealth ship Shadow. Their vessel was tiny compared to the Kelvari warships, barely large enough for 6 people and their equipment. But it had one critical advantage. It was nearly invisible to Kelvari sensors. Final checks, Harrison ordered his team. Once we're aboard their command ship, we'll have 15 minutes to plant the device and get out. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Ben Russell, checked the prototype device one last time. It was surprisingly small, about the size of a football, but contained technology that might save Earth. Device is ready, Captain, Russell confirmed. The Shadow slipped between the massive Kelvari ships, approaching High Commander Vox's flagship. The immense vessel was nearly 2 miles long, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields. Their shields are designed to stop attacks, not small ships moving slowly, Harrison reminded his team. We drift in with their own debris. The recent asteroid attacks had left plenty of wreckage floating around the Kelvari fleet. The Shadow powered down and drifted with this debris, approaching the flagship's hull. Inside the flagship, High Commander Vox prepared for the final assault on Earth. Begin bombardment of their defensive positions, he ordered. Once those are eliminated, we will destroy their population centers. The first wave of Kelvari ships moved into Earth's atmosphere. They were met with a barrage of energy weapons fired from ground installations. Several alien ships crashed to the surface, but more kept coming. Meanwhile, the Shadow reached the hull of Vox's flagship. Harrison's team exited their ship in space, suits carrying the prototype device. Using tools designed by Jake Collins, they cut through the hull and entered the massive vessel. We're in, Harrison reported quietly through his secure comlink. Moving to the central core. The team moved through the ship's corridors, avoiding Kelvari crew members. The aliens were focused on the battle and never expected enemies inside their flagship. On Earth, the defensive weapons were beginning to fail under the constant assault. General Rodriguez received reports of Kelvari ships landing in multiple locations. We need more time, she told Admiral Hernandez. Harrison's team isn't in position yet. We'll give them time, Hernandez replied. She ordered the remaining Earth ships to attack the Kelvari fleet directly, a suicide mission, but one that might buy precious minutes. Aboard the flagship, Harrison's team reached the central core, the heart of the ship where the quantum communication network was controlled. They placed the device against the main processor. Device in position, Harrison reported. Activating now. He pressed a sequence of buttons on the device. It began to glow with soft blue light. What is it doing? Russell asked. According to Dr. Collins, it's creating a feedback loop in their quantum network, Harrison explained, but with a human twist. The human twist was something the Kelvari could never have anticipated. Instead of simply disrupting their communications, the device began broadcasting into the quantum network. It sent images and footage recovered from the Kelvari database, showing their recent defeats by humans. It showed Earth ships destroying Kelvari vessels, humans escaping captivity, and Earth's defenders standing against overwhelming odds. Most importantly, it broadcast these images to every ship in the Kelvari fleet simultaneously, and not just to the commanders but to every crew member. On the bridge of his flagship, High Commander Vox stared in horror as his view screens filled with images of human victories. "Shut it down," he shouted. "Cut the quantum network." But it was too late. The device had infected the entire system, and now it was sending a new message. one created by Major Kevin Walsh's psychological warfare team. It showed the Kelvari Imperium's history of conquering peaceful species, contrasted with footage of Earth's nations coming together in unity, despite their differences. The message was clear. The Kelvari were not the superior civilization they claimed to be. Harrison and his team returned to their ship as confusion spread throughout the Kelvari fleet. Ships stopped firing as crew members saw the broadcasts. Phase 1 complete, Harrison reported, returning to Earth. On Vox's flagship, confusion turned to chaos. For the first time in the Imperium's history, their perfect communication had become their greatest weakness. The humans had not just fought back, they had changed the rules of the game entirely. The Kelvari fleet hung in Earth's orbit, their formation broken. Many ships drifted aimlessly as their crews argued among themselves. For the first time in 1,000 years, the perfect discipline of the Imperium was shattered. High Commander. Vox pounded his fist on the control panel. Restore order. Cut all communications if you must. But it was too late. The damage was done. The quantum network that had been their greatest strength was now their greatest weakness. The human device continued to broadcast images of resistance throughout the fleet. On the Defiance, Admiral Hernandez gathered her officers. Harrison's team succeeded. Now we push our advantage. Earth's remaining ships emerged from hiding. They were joined by new vessels, hastily built and crewed by volunteers. What they lacked in size and power they made up for in determination. Ambassador Nicole Garcia prepared for her role in the next phase. She had once been a language professor, before the war. Now she carried humanity's message to the stars. The translation is ready, she told Hernandez. I've studied their language from the data we recovered. I can speak to them directly. Make it count, Hernandez replied. Garcia's message was broadcast on all frequencies, including the compromised Kelvari network. Her face appeared on screens. Throughout the alien fleet. People of the Kelvari Imperium, she began, speaking in their own language. We do not wish to be your enemies. We wish to live in peace. But we will defend our world and our freedom with everything we have. In another part of the galaxy, the message reached other alien species who had been conquered by the Kelvari. For the first time, they saw that the Imperium could be challenged. On a planet called Neri, Governor Kaz of the Vosi people watched Garcia's broadcast with growing hope. The Vosi had been slaves of the Kelvari for 3 centuries. If the humans can resist, perhaps we can too, he whispered to his advisors. Similar conversations happened across a dozen worlds. The spark of rebellion was lit. Back at Earth, High, Commander Vox had finally managed to isolate his flagship from the infected network. He gathered his loyal officers. We must crush these humans completely, he raged. Prepare the planet killer weapon. The planet killer was the Imperium's ultimate weapon, capable of destroying an entire world. It had been used only twice in their history, against species that had proven too dangerous to control. As the weapon powered up, Earth's sensors detected the massive energy buildup. General Rodriguez contacted Admiral Hernandez immediately. They're preparing something big, she reported. Our readings are off the charts. Samantha Wright, who had studied the Kelvari data more thoroughly than anyone, recognized the pattern. It's their planet killer weapon. We found references to it in their database, but no details on how it works. Jake Collins looked grim. If they fire that, all our defenses will mean nothing. Captain Harrison volunteered for a final mission. My team can try to disable it. Too risky, Hernandez argued. Their security will be at its highest. We have no choice, Harrison insisted. As they prepared for this last desperate mission, Alan Nelson noticed something in the sensor data. Wait, look at this. The weapon creates a quantum field similar to their communication network. Jake examined the readings and suddenly smiled. That's it. They're using the same technology. If we can amplify our device's signal, we might be able to affect their weapon. They worked frantically to modify the prototype. Harrison's team would still need to get close enough to the flagship to establish the connection. The shadow slipped through the chaotic Kelvari fleet once more, approaching Vox's flagship. This time security was much tighter. They barely made it through the defenses. Inside, they fought their way toward the weapon control center. 2 of Harrison's team were injured in firefights with Kelvari guards. "We're running out of time," Harrison said as they reached the massive chamber where the planet killer was controlled. Lieutenant Russell placed the modified device near the weapons control systems. "Activating now." The device didn't destroy the planet killer as they had hoped. Instead, it created a cascading failure that spread through the quantum field. The energy meant to destroy Earth was redirected back into the Kelvari fleet. Ships began to lose power. Control systems failed. Weapons went offline. On the flagship's bridge, High Commander Vox watched in horror as his fleet was crippled by their own technology. "What have they done?" he whispered. Harrison and his remaining team escaped the flagship as systems failed around them. They returned to Earth as the Kelvari fleet drifted helplessly in space. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, the Kelvari Imperium retreated. Their once mighty armada limped away from Earth, returning to their own territory to report their unthinkable defeat. In the months that followed, Earth received transmissions from other species who had been under Kelvari control. Ambassador Garcia established contact with a dozen worlds, forming what would become known as the Galactic Coalition. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the Council of Free Worlds met for the first time. Representatives from Earth sat alongside. Delegates from species they had never known existed before the war. Governor Kaz of the Vossi addressed the council. "For centuries, my people lived under Kelvari rule. We believed resistance was impossible. Then we saw what the humans accomplished." Ambassador Garcia smiled. "We did what any of you would have done. We defended our home." "No," Kaz replied. "We would have surrendered. That is why the Kelvari conquered us so easily. But you humans fought when victory seemed impossible. You adapted when you should have been defeated. You showed the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for." Meanwhile, the Kelvari Imperium faced internal rebellion as subject species rose up against their rule. The once mighty empire began to fragment. In a prison on Earth, Captain Alan Nelson interviewed a captured Kelvari officer. "I've always wondered," Nelson said, "why did you think you could defeat us so easily?" The Kelvari looked at him with large, sad eyes. "We have conquered hundreds of worlds. No species had ever successfully resisted us." "What made us different?" Nelson asked. "You humans are unpredictable," the officer replied. "All other species we encountered fought as we did, with direct force against force, but you changed the rules. You used our strengths against us. You fought in ways we could not understand." Nelson smiled slightly. "Do you know why? Throughout human history, we've primarily fought ourselves. We've been battling the most dangerous opponents possible for thousands of years. Other humans." He leaned closer to the alien. "Your fundamental mistake wasn't attacking Earth. It was failing to understand that you had picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The Kelvari officer looked away. In the silence that followed, both understood a simple truth. The universe would never be the same again. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they were here to stay.